All right, how you guys are doing today? Happy Friday. I'm back with another video. You know how I like to do. Things are tough. You're trying to find time to do things, and I wish I could do a video every day, but I don't have that kind of time. So I like to at least try to get a video out at least once a week. And so here we are with another one. Now, this one is to piggyback off the last video I did on salsa music. But this is a rebuttal video to Dr. Cologne. I don't know if you guys know or not, but he did a rebuttal video against my video. And I found it to be hilarious because what I discovered is that he didn't do any research. Basically what he did, he freestyle. I think in his mind, he believed he has superior intellect. So he feels as though he don't have to research. So basically what he did was use my video and try to use in other words, use my video to try to debunk me off my own information. But what he didn't understand is that when I reference certain things, he should have reviewed those things that I referenced, like Ray Vega's lecture, because then he would have been able to determine, put all the things in proper context. He didn't do it. So he made certain assumptions. He also fabricated statements that I made. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play for you some of the things that he fabricated a little bit later. But let's go in order with the things that he tried to debunk me on. Now, I didn't play my audio, like the things that I said, because I didn't want to take up a whole lot of time. So if you want to know what I actually said, you can always go to my video about FBA Creative Salsa Music. I just recorded his vocal part, and he'll give his explanation in terms of what he thinks I was trying to say. A lot of it he got wrong. So let's start with the Jelly Roll Morton comment. Let me get that one going.
Then he begins by speaking about Jelly Roll Morton. Okay, Jelly Roll Morton and the Spanish tinge. Now, the Spanish tinge describes the style of music that he plays. This word that describes this style of playing has nothing to do with the cultures of Spain, right? So we know that. Or
he didn't know that. He's acting like he knew that, but he didn't know that. I definitely know Randy didn't know that. Here we go.
Or Portuguese. The tinge refers to a certain rhythm. It's the rhythm of Africa. But let's hear him read the definition of the Spanish tinge. So notice, it is a reference to an Afro-Latin rhythm that spices up most or more rhythms commonly used in jazz and popular music. It adds a spice to it. Okay, so he takes the Afro-Latin style and decides that they are not playing it right, and he changes it to a New Orleans style, which is another flavor of the tinge, right? But the Spanish tinge is still in there. There are different ways to play the Spanish tinge. You can play it with the Latin style, or you can play it with the jazz style. Okay, I gotta read this. Then he says, we're talking about rhythm and not melodies that you might associate with a particular culture. The melody or the rhythm is associated with the culture. It's Afro-Cuban culture. This is me saying this. It's Latino culture, not foundational Black American culture. It originates in Africa. But what he's trying to say is that it's a certain rhythm and melody. Yeah, the original rhythm and melody comes from Afro-Cuban culture. It's not American culture.
Okay, let me stop it right there. I wasn't trying to say that it came from African American culture. I wasn't trying to say that. I was merely pointing out that the rhythm is African, is not Latin. That's what I was trying to explain. He doesn't understand music at all. So his explanation of what the Spanish tinge means, he has no clue. He's not a musician. He can't possibly know. He's what he's doing. He's freestyling. That's what Dr. Cologne is doing. He thinks he's so smart that he doesn't have to do any research. He feels as though he could just freestyle. So let me, for those who may not understand these terms, the Spanish tinge and the history of where it comes from, let me play this short video, and it's going to describe it. As you see on your screen, you see the contradanza, the tranquillo, the habanera, and ragtime. Basically, all those things mean the same thing. The same double pulse polyrhythm that comes from West Africa. What's going on is that this particular rhythm has been Latinized. In other words, colonizers come in. We know how colonizers do. They discover something and they just rename it, right? That's what they do. So when you hear words like the contradanza cubano, that's just another word or a Latin phrase for these African double pulse polyrhythms that we're talking about from Africa. They should have been calling them the contradanza africano, but no, they call it the contradanza cubano. They put a white face on that term, and then everybody thinks it's associated with them. So let me play this for you.
It takes a very special, talented person to transcribe, to take music out of thin air and write it down for others to perform and for others to listen to. In essence, it preserves the sound of the day. Cuban pianist Manuel Saumel did just that for the Cuban contradanza, which came to Cuba by way of the Haitian Revolt.
So there we go. This is what I'm talking about. They're giving credit to this white individual for creating the Cuban contradanza, or the contradanza cubano. But it was inspired by Africans. Okay, so here we go. Now, the next voice you're going to hear is a gentleman explaining that the contradanza cubano came from Africans. Let's play it.
The contradanza was brought here by the French, but here in Cuba, the musicians were mainly black or colored mulattoes. So, of course, these black musicians, they put something of their own musicality in the French contradanza, and that's how the Cuban contradanza was born.
So there you have it. There you have it. So when the French brought their contradanza to Cuba, the Africans got a hold of that music, interpreted it in their way, and then it got labeled the contradanza cubano. All of that means the same thing. There's no difference when Jelly Roll Morton refers to the Spanish tinge or the New Orleans style. All of that is the same thing. People call it different things because here's the thing. Dr. Cologne don't know music. He doesn't know music history. So he's freestyling. So, and this is what he does throughout the video. Throughout the whole video, he's doing nothing but freestyling. Let me go back up here. Give me 1 second, guys. All right. All right, 1 second. All right, get my slides up and ready. Okay, now you might wonder, why do I have a picture of flat Earth? All right, let's go to the next clip and I'm going to explain why that's there.
At this point, he's going to use a clip from a woman by the name of Amy. And Amy is going to explain the Latin tinge. But let's listen to the clip.
American music almost universally lacks, but only nested polyrhythms that come basically directly from Africa. And they've been retained in this music tradition. And that's why, as black people were brought over from Africa, and sold to slaveholders in the Americas. The French, Spanish, and Portuguese slaveholders that predominated in Southern and Central America let the slaves keep their drums, and so the drum tradition was preserved. Whereas in Northern America, the largely British slave owners, they took the drums from the slaves, and so a new rhythm developed that had less to do with Africa. Okay, so like I said, in theory, she's correct about the drumming being taken away from North America, but I already demonstrated in my previous videos that wasn't throughout all of America. So watch what's said. In Northern American music, you have the swing that Latin American music lacks. That's what she said. So what? Right? All she's simply explaining is the difference. Not that one is better than the other. Like he makes this comment like, oh, it.
What is he talking about? What are you talking about, Cologne? I wasn't trying to disparage one form of music from the other. See, he's making this stuff up. If you guys watch my video and I'm talking about this particular subject, I made no disparaging comment about Latin music. So maybe he's referring to another video. Let's keep it moving.
All she's explaining is the difference. Okay, notice what she said, that in North America, the British slave owners took the drums from the slaves. This clip destroys the whole argument that the drum was here, that you made 2 videos about. It destroys that. Okay? Then he says that the misperception of many people is that the drum wasn't here. These are experts that are saying this history. These are historians. You're not a historian. Every historian that I've ever heard talk about the subject says the same thing. When they came to the Americas, they were stripped. Okay? Then he says, watch what my friend says, that people believe that Africans in North America lost contact with Africa totally. That is not what we believe. We said they lost many of their traditions in the hells of North America, including the drum. So now...
Okay. Now, in the video he did about not the contradanza, about the Skaga, when he tried to, pull that BS over on all of us, he clearly said we lost everything. So you guys watch his video on the Discaga and you'll hear him say that. So let's get back to Amy talking about that the drums weren't in America, North America. Now, you heard me acknowledge that, yes, for the most part, that is true. But there is Congo Square. There is the Gullah Geechee people. Now, what Dr. Cologne, and Dr. Cologne knows this. He knows that this is real history. But instead of acknowledging that, just like I acknowledge that, yes, overall, there was a banning of the drums, he rather ignore the truth about Congo Square and the truth about the Gullah Geechee people. Because his narrative has to be that we had no access to the drums. Therefore, any percussion and congas or whatever that's in our music, we got it from the Caribbean or from Cuba or from Puerto Rico. He needs so much credit. He thrives on this notion of getting all this credit for things that he doesn't deserve. So this is where this comes from. Listen, I don't care how many people say the drums were taken away in America totally. I don't care. It doesn't change the fact that Congo Square existed. It doesn't change the fact that the Gullah Geechee people existed. So to use Amy's assessment of what happened in North America, and also, matter of fact, Salsa Goals also made the same assessment. Matter of fact, a lot of people make the same assessment. And I like to think you only know what you know. If you don't know about Congo Square, and if you don't know about the Gullah Geechee people, you're going to make that same assertion. You're going to regurgitate the same nonsense. That's why you have to get in the books. You have to study and learn about the true history. So this is why I have this particular picture of flat Earth, because there's a lot of people still today that believe the Earth is flat, even though there's evidence that it's round. So even though you might believe that there were no drums, there is evidence that the drums did exist to some extent. Now, I didn't really want to go into it in the prior videos about the possibility of more people from Africa being having those traditions still intact, because I couldn't single it to a particular group of people. But what I could do, let me go here. I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. Give me 1 second. And then I'll come back. Okay. Let me do this. Give me 1 second while I retrieve some notes here. Okay. Now, we all know, or we should know by now, that slavery didn't end in 1808. I mean, at least the transatlantic slave trade didn't end in 1808. Now, I have some material that I'm not going to go into detail right now, but Dr. Cologne, trust me, I have the material. I'm not freestyling like you. I have material available that shows that Cuba, that the illegal slave trade went on after the transatlantic slave trade ended. And many of the slave ships were built out of New York. I have all that information. Okay? So, guess who was what country provided the most illegal slaves to America from 1811 to 1865? Cuba. Cuba was buying slaves by the hundreds of thousands, and then shipping them or smuggling them through the helps of, of Americans into America's South. And the reason why this investigation was done, because no one could explain the sharp rise in the black population in the United States from the time slavery or the transatlantic slave trade was ended. No one could explain the humongous numbers. And we're all told that all these numbers came from breeding, but there's evidence to show that as much as 50,000 slaves from Cuba entered the United States illegally. Now, you may not believe this, Dr. Cologne, but it's true. So what we have is many Africans in America that knew where they came from, knew what the drums sound like, knew their language up until 1865. And many of them lived into the 20th century. So while I can't point to a specific group of people, I can certainly point to data that clearly shows that this happened. Now, this gentleman here, his name is, he goes by the name of Cujo Lewis. He was one of the last members to survive from the Clotilda, which was an illegal slave trade from Africa directly to the United States. And they found the ship, and that's the picture of the ship. Let me try to enlarge that for you guys. Let me get rid of this thing at the bottom here. 1 second now. Let me enlarge this for you. Okay. This is the Clotilda. The Clotilda. It was a ship that made it to Africa and came back in 1860. And the people, many of the descendants, lived until the 20th century, 1935 and 1940. Okay? They maintained their African roots. Let me read a little bit of the story. The U.S. involvement in the Atlantic slave trade had been banned by Congress through the act prohibiting importation of slaves enacted on March 2nd, 1808. But the practice continued illegally, especially through the slave traders based in New York in the 1850s and then 1860. In the case of the Clotilda, the voyage sponsors were based in South and planned to buy Africans in Wydad, Dahomey. After the voyage, the ship was burnt and scuttled in the Mobile Bay in attempts to destroy the evidence. After the Civil War, Cujo Lewis, that's the gentleman you see on your screen, and 31 other formerly enslaved people found Africatown on the north side of Mobile, Alabama. They were joined by other continental Africans and formed a community that continues to practice many of their West African traditions in Yoruba language for decades. A spokesman for the community, Cujo Lewis, lived until 1935 and was one of the last survivors from the Clotilda. Redoshi, another captive of the Clotilda, was sold to a planter in Dallas County, Alabama, where she became known also as Sally Smith. She married, had a daughter, and lived to 1937 in Bogchito. She was long thought to have been the last survivor of the Clotilda. Research published 2020 indicate that another survivor, Matilda McClear, lived until 1940. Some 100 descendants of the enslaved people carried by the Clotilda still lived in Africatown, and others around the country. After World War II, the neighborhood was absorbed by the city of Mobile. Let me read that last one. Some 100 descendants of the enslaved people carried by the Clotilda still lived in Africatown, and others are around the country. These are people who know their African heritage, know of African traditions, are spread throughout the country. So to say that all Africans lost some recognition of who they are is totally false. But see, you refuse. I guarantee it. Dr. Clone will not accept this evidence because that's just who he is. Because the percussions come from them. It doesn't come from us. So I don't expect him to believe it. It's okay. It's okay. I know I have the facts. All right. So let me go, give 1 second. Let me go back to some of his good old recordings. Okay, he goes into, let's see what he says first before I opine. Let me see what he says first. Let's do it.
He talks about James Reese Europe. Notice that my friend says that he was asked to put together the best band. If you watch the video, that's what Reese was asked. Put together the best band. Then Reese went to Puerto Rico to find the best musicians. He was ordered to find black Puerto Ricans for his band.
Okay, let me stop it right there. Now, Dr. Cologne is going to mix up two events. And he's only doing that because he doesn't research. He didn't review the Ray Vega video that clearly spells out the chronology of what happened. All right. So what Dr. Cologne is addressing right here is when James Reese Europe was enlisted in the army and he was told by his commander, a colonel, to go to Puerto Rico to get musicians. And he said, get black musicians. Okay. There's a reason why they had to be black. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later. So, but basically he's mixing particular events. So, it had nothing to do with, like he had to go to Puerto Rico because that's where the best musicians were. It had nothing to do with that. 9 times out of 10, we're talking about 1917, World War I. Let's say James Reese Europe band back in the day, like say 1910, let's say his band members were above the age of 31. They wouldn't be eligible to go to the army. So maybe at that time in 1917, he had to find musicians because the colonel wanted a band to be a part of the military, a military band. So since Puerto Ricans just became citizens, he needed to get people who looked like the leader. They had to be black. Why? Because the military was racist. They didn't want black soldiers. White soldiers didn't want the black soldiers to serve with them. Okay? So he had to find black musicians. So he sent them down to Puerto Rico to find black musicians. It wasn't that the black musicians were better musicians, or I'm talking about the Puerto Ricans. It doesn't mean that those Puerto Ricans were better than the white Puerto Ricans, but they, in order to serve in the military in that capacity, they had to be black. Okay? But Dr. Cologne doesn't know that. Okay? Because he's trying to debunk me off my own video, and he's failing miserably. Let's see what else he has to say, and then I might have to address something else. Hold on.
So, watch the Ray Vega clip.
His name is James Reese Europe, a very important figure in basically jazz history.
Then my friend.
Now, what I'm talking about right there, I'm talking about pre-1917. I'm describing what he did pre-1917. Unfortunately, Dr. Cologne is thinking I'm talking about the military band, the Harlem Hellfighters. But he makes that mistake because he doesn't research. The brother is freestyling. You can't freestyle, brother. You can't freestyle. Let's keep it going.
Says this. He says that this was all African American and no Latinos were present. But wait, didn't you say that he was sent to Puerto Rico to get black Puerto Ricans for his band?
Again, like I said, he's mixing different periods of time. I'm talking about 1910, where it was an all African American unit. He's mixing it all up. So, Dr. Cologne, get your chronology right. Watch the Ray Vega lecture. Then you will get the proper context as to why I made certain comments. You can't freestyle. Let's keep it moving.
Let's listen to a little excerpt about another famous person by the name of Rafael Hernandez.
If you go to even...
Now check this out. Watch what he says. He says that the musicians in Puerto Rico and those places were known for their excellent musical training. But my friend says before this clip that what Mr. Europe was doing was considered mastery among the African Americans. So the expertise among the African American musicians were at a very high level. And yet Ray Vega says that the musicians in Puerto Rico and the places like that were known for their excellent musical training.
Again, I'm talking about two different periods of time. When I was talking about the excellence of Europe's group back in 1910, they were the best in the world. But Dr. Cologne is not researching this. He's freestyling. Let's keep it moving.
Here's something I notice every time. I notice that whenever he plays a Ray Vega clip, at certain points he stops it. And I wonder why he does that. Could it be so that you won't hear the obvious Cuban influences in the sound?
Again, he's wrong. I stop it because I don't need to prolong the video in order to make my point. Dr. Cologne, this is my challenge to you. You play all of Ray Vega's clips and see if I took anything out of context. Furthermore, Rafael Fernandez, the clip of him playing is not any Latin influence. So if you think it is, then you play it. I'm not going to waste time playing music or trying to, I can't play everything, Dr. Cologne. So if you have the time to play it, you play it. All right? So let's go to another one. Oh yeah, before I do that, let me do this. I want to explain to you guys why. Let's see. Let me play for you why the particular military or the Europe's band had to be black. Let me find this real quick. All right, let's do this. All right, here we go. All right. Now listen to this, guys. Listen to this. Why it's not playing? Play, we gotta come on, play. Why is this
in the military?
Okay, here we go.
It was very difficult at that time for African Americans to get into the United States military because there was this perception that African Americans would not do well in battle. They had to overcome the prejudice of their own countrymen and yet also perform ably on the battlefield.
Like so many units of African American descent, when they go overseas, they're not sure what they're going to do. Are they going to fight as infantry, or are they going to be stevedores and load ships?
All right, listen. Now what I'm going to do. Okay, let me stop that right there. Okay, let me read for you what happened in Puerto Rico during that period of time, and this would explain why James Reese Europe had to get black Puerto Ricans. Okay, let's read this. The United States took over Puerto Rico in the aftermath of what U.S. historians call the Spanish-American War. A military government followed after the war, but by 1900, Congress approved the Foraker Act, which gave Puerto Rico its first civilian government under U.S. sovereignty. One of the most important aspects of the law is that it has made the island's inhabitants citizens of Puerto Rico and American nationals under the protection of the United States. The question remains, why did the U.S. extend citizenship to the people of Puerto Rico in 1917? There were many reasons. Military planners worried that American territories would be hard to defend from an invasion if the native population did not support the American forces. Between 1915 and 1917, there was a growing discontent with America's rule among Puerto Rico's population. For the U.S. War Department, stability on the island was essential to securing the U.S. hegemony in the Circum-Caribbean. Powerful lobbyists, including congressmen, military theorists, former presidents, and governors of Puerto Rico, argued that the citizens would quench unrest in Puerto Rico and led to a socio-political stability. The Woodrow Wilson administration also believed that it would gain diplomatic clout from granting citizenship to some measure of the self-government to the Puerto Rican people. Citizenship for the Puerto Rican would strengthen the President Wilson's vision of peace in part, in which would be based on the self-determination of nations. The United States approved the Jones Act, expanding civilian government in Puerto Rico, and extension of U.S. citizenship to its inhabitants. When citizenship was extended to Puerto Ricans, enlisting them to fight in World War I was not part of the equation. Puerto Ricans were not wanted by racist military that deemed non-white men as inferior. The War Department had little interest in using Puerto Rican manpower, so the Puerto Ricans themselves pressured President Wilson into ordering the military to create a Puerto Rican division. Eventually, the War Department authorized the creation of 94 Infantry Division to be composed of 4 Puerto Rican regiments, the 373rd, the 374th, the 375th, and the 376th. Though unconvinced of their value as first-line combat troops, listen to this, the War Department believed that the mobilization of Puerto Ricans would prove useful. These soldiers should relieve white continental American soldiers from non-combat assignments, freeing them for combat duty while inspiring loyalty among the population of the island. They needed those Puerto Ricans to be black so they could be part of this, like these work battalions, unloading ships and things of that nature, cleaning latrines and what have you. And they needed them to be black so they could pull them from those duties if necessary to perform in different parts of Europe. So they had to be able to live together, separate from white folks. So this is why they had to be black. So Dr. Colon don't know the history, so he's freestyling. This is what he's doing throughout the whole video. Hold on. Now this is going to prove how Dr. Colon didn't do any research. Okay, he's just using my video, not doing any research whatsoever. So listen to this particular small clip, a very small clip.
Something interesting about Mario, he was a Cuban. He helped discover Ella Fitzgerald.
Okay, so he's wrong about that. Now, listen, if you guys go on Wikipedia or go on the web and type in Mario Basil, Ella Fitzgerald. You're going to get a lot of them saying that he allegedly discovered Ella Fitzgerald. So it's some kind of, fairy tale, or it's not proven. Okay. So what I did, I researched the topic, and the website, or not the website, the title of the article is called Homeless to Household Name, Ella Fitzgerald's Big Break. So if you were to type in that title in the web browser, you will find this article. I took out certain segments of it to condense it so I can make my point. Okay, so I'm reading from this article. Despite his chronic spinal tuberculosis, which gave him a hunchback appearance, Chick Webb was like Ella, determined to break through to the big time. In 1935, he decided that maybe what his band needed was a female vocalist, and he tasked Charles Linton, his band's handsome lead singer, with that task of finding him one. Linton explained that they left it to me because I knew all the women that they were, well, beautiful. The singer Linton found, however, was not what Webb initially had in mind. On a tip from an acquaintance who knew Ella's when at the Apollo, Linton went to visit her and heard her sing. Despite her appearance, Linton knew that she was something special. He brought her to Webb, who took one look at her and whispered, "You're not putting that on my bandstand. No, 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 out." Undeterred, Linton turned to Webb's manager, Charlie Buchanan, and threatened to quit if he refused to listen to her. After a trial of 2 weeks, Webb made Ella his lead female vocalist. Now, that's the truth. That's the truth. So, like I said, if you were to go online and look at Mario Basil discovering Ella Fitzgerald, it would say allegedly. So it's some type of myth or fairy tale. It's not true. But again, Dr. Cologne is not doing the research. He's taking my video and he's trying to use it to debunk me, or to highlight this important figure, Mario Basil, which I agree is a very important figure. But don't make this declaration and you didn't do the research. I left it out there. I mean, it meant nothing to me. I could care less who discovered who. It's the talent that matters at the end of the day. So let's move on here. Let's go to the next one.
All Chick Webb was saying to Mario was that he didn't play like a black musician. Chick Webb's band was not a Latin band, and Webb needed Mario to play like a black musician. Mario was the lead and musical director of the Chick Webb Orchestra. So here's a Cuban who's the leader of the orchestra, right? But when have you ever seen an African American ever be the leader of a salsa band? Please inform me. Mario was also a very great mentor to Dizzy Gillespie. Mario pushed the band toward Latin arrangements. This is what's said. So who's influencing who? Who's influencing who? Right? Now my friend is going to comment, and he's going to try to say that during these times, the Cubans were traveling back.
Okay, that's another topic he's getting ready to go into. We could get into that one. Now, Dr. Cologne, if you read or you listened to the Ray Vega video or lecture, he clearly said, Dizzy Gillespie and most of the black musicians, African-American musicians, didn't take those Latin rhythms as seriously. They took it as a novelty. It's not about influencing anyone here. Those Cubans didn't influence the Americans because the trajectory of the music did not change for African Americans. They still did their thing. You guys went a different area. The Cubans went a different area. They created a different music. The African Americans pretty much continued to do what they did. So they didn't influence the African American jazz musicians. Not really, not in a very significant way. We continued to do what we were doing. So I don't know where you're going with that. So let me see. 1 second. And then he makes this comment about you never seen a black musician in charge of a salsa band. Listen, it's not that we couldn't have done it. We just had no interest in doing it. If this is your standard, Ricky Ricardo, come on, man. If he could be a band leader, you don't think a black person could be a band leader? Come on, Dr. Cologne, really? So, I mean, to think that somehow we couldn't have done it, that we were incapable of doing it, that's just totally ridiculous. Let me see. Okay, let me go here. Let's go to another clip. Okay, now this is where he totally misrepresents me. Normally, he would be playing, if you go to his video, he plays my clips. But in this particular video or portion of the video, he doesn't play what I said. He just tells you what his interpretation is of what I said. Okay? Like, listen to this.
Now my friend is going to comment, and he's going to try to say that during these times, the Cubans were traveling back and forth to their country, to New York. And they would take what they learned and bring it back to Cuba, or where they came from. You see what he's doing? No one said that they took what they learned in New York and brought it back. So there goes the African American influence to salsa. Where do you see that in any clip? You're adding that. This is what my friend is adding. That's what they were doing. That's what they had to be doing. But no historical clip even shows anything remotely that remotely resembles that is what was taking place. Notice that he said that everything that those Cubans learned, they learned from American jazz artists, as if to say that they did not have high-level skills in their own country before coming to America. But here we go, my friend. He goes back to Mr. Europe and he talks about the superior sound that his orchestra had, and that nothing like that was happening in Cuba. But wait, didn't he go to Puerto Rico and find black Puerto Ricans for his band? Let's listen to what my friend says. Check the clip out. Ray said that the musicians in those islands had extraordinary skills. Let's listen.
Musicians in places like Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Panama, etc., were known for their excellent musical training.
My friend said that Cuba was doing nothing like what the black Americans were doing, but Ray Vega said, again, I'm re-stressing this, that the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans were known for their excellent musical training. I'm gonna re-emphasize this over and over. And then he gets to the part of the video where he starts talking about machito. Check out this clip.
So by 38, he's a member of the Cab Calloway band. In 1941, he decides that he's going to make a bit of a switch, and he decides that he's going to put together a band that will be just like an American big band. The trumpets, saxophones, playing and arranging techniques that are used in an American big band. But the entire rhythm section is going to be Latin guys.
Let me stop it right there. Let me address what I was actually talking about. Then I'll come back to this particular clip. I'm going to play what I actually said. I don't want to lose my concentration in terms of not addressing that, because he totally lied about that part, about what I said about the Cubans didn't have the skills. I was never addressing the skills of the Cuban musicians. Let me play what I actually said.
Okay, let me stop it right there.
Now, we have to keep in mind that during the 30s, or at least the late 20s, 30s, and 40s, there was a lot of traveling with Cuban musicians who would come to record. Some would stay in New York and play with these bands. They would take what they learned, go to Cuba, set up their own orchestras in Cuba. So when you see video of the bands and the orchestras in Cuba, keep in mind those arrangements or those particular ensembles did not exist prior to the time Cubans were coming to America. Everything that those Cubans learned, they learned from American jazz artists. So it was never the other way around. It was never the Cubans teaching Americans how to put together an orchestra. It was the opposite. I gave you an example of James Reese Europe. Back in the early 1900s, before World War I, he had these kind of orchestras already set up. Cuba wasn't doing nothing, was not on that level. And I'm going to play you later, before I end this video, what was going on in the 1920s, what the music sounded like. Okay, let me stop it right there. Now, there you go. What was I talking about? I was talking about setting up orchestras. Was I trying to disrespect the musicality of the musicians in Cuba? No, I wasn't. I wasn't doing that. But Dr. Cologne was trying to present it as if I was. Now, keep in mind, he could have played this audio clip that I just played for you, but he didn't. He decided to make something up that I said and try to spin it as if I was dissing the Cuban musicians. I was talking about orchestras, and I backed that up in my video about, FBA's creating salsa. Let me remind Dr. Cologne what I said and why I said what I said, because I got that from a source, from Salsa Forums. Let me read a little portion of it. Okay, let me see where I can start. Every large orchestra patterned itself after the North American U.S. bands. To a certain degree, we can directly credit an African American for this in the form of Fletcher Henderson, who launched the first multi-trumpet, multi-sax orchestration of popular music. This is not only the model of every orchestra that makes up the 1930s and 40s era for jazz, but its impact was also felt throughout the Caribbean, which includes Cuba and South America. So that is the context in which I'm making that statement. So why Dr. Cologne decided to lie about that is beyond me. Let me see what's going on here. This computer is acting stupid. All right. Let's play. Let me go back to what we're talking about, him lying. Let me go back to that.
Now my friend is going to...
Let me hold up for a second. Let me continue.
Then you get Machito.
Here we go. Machito.
Check out this clip.
So by 38, he's a member of the Cab Calloway band. In 1941, he decides that he's going to make a bit of a switch, and he decides that he's going to put together a band that will be just like an American big band. The trumpets, saxophones, playing and arranging techniques that are used in an American big band. But the entire rhythm section is going to be Latin guys. So it's going to be like big band style with the percussionist playing an Afro-Caribbean thing. And the band was called Machito and his Afro-Cubans. They wound up calling it that. His brother-in-law was Frank Machito Grillo, and he was a singer from Cuba, and he put together a group called Machito and his Afro-Cubans. Now that's a funny thing, because it wasn't really Afro-Cubans. There were a couple of Afro-Cubans in the band, but the band was made up of African Americans. The rhythm section was mostly Puerto Rican. It was an interesting mix of African Americans and Latinos from different places all together, really playing now what is going to be considered a very new style of music.
So Machito's going to put together a band like an American big band, but the music would be Cuban style. Who's in that?
Wrong. If you listen to Ray Vega very carefully, he didn't say the music would be Cuban style. See, that's Dr. Cologne interjecting his own bias. What Ray Vega is saying, he said the percussion section, the rhythm section would be Afro-Cuban, not the music. The rhythm section would be Afro-Cuban. But for Dr. Cologne, he's trying to take credit from Black Americans by saying that your influence in this particular new music is not that great. That's what Dr. Cologne has always done in this hip hop discussion as well. Always trying to take credit away. All right, let's play the rest of it.
Band, African Americans, Puerto Ricans, all together, they were playing a new style of music. It's a Latin thing like the son, right? Everything else was familiar to the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans, but they added the brass.
You see how he disrespects the new music, which is called Latin jazz. He totally disrespects it. He just said they added the brass. It's much more than that. Ray Vega said the big sound that talked about arrangements. He didn't use these words, but it's talking about compositions, complex chord arrangements. All of that comes from Black Americans is a big factor in this new music. This would not have happened if it weren't for the Black Americans. Latin jazz, which leads to salsa, which leads to the cha-cha-cha, which leads to the mambo, would not be in existence had it not been for African American jazz musicians and influence. All right? So he's totally misinforming or not telling the truth about the actual facts. Because again, he likes to take credit from Black Americans. This is what he loves to do. So let's continue.
They were not copying the Black influence. They were using...
Listen, nobody's talking about copying the Black influence. They were using the Black influence. Come on, Dr. Cologne. You don't know nothing about music. Let's go.
Big band techniques of arrangements. That's all they were doing. They were not copying anything. They were using the techniques of the arrangements.
Well, don't you think that is important, Dr. Cologne? Don't you think that's huge? The arrangements, don't you think that's huge? You cannot detract, you can't separate it to just horns or brass and say, oh, that's insignificant. Because if truth be told, we can do that with you too. The music was already created before the Puerto Ricans started really getting involved in it. They didn't add nothing to that music before then. So let's get real here, man. You act like you did something. Like Puerto Ricans did. They didn't do jack in the beginning of Latin jazz. Name me one Puerto Rican pioneer in the 40s. You can't do it. You can't do it. Let me tell you how important African Americans, not only were they in the Machito band, but let me read this part. Because, see, you don't know nothing, Dr. Cologne. I got to educate you. All right? This is also from Salsa Forums. Mr. Edgar Sampson, you know who he is? He was the arranger for Chick Webb. So when you talk about Mario Bowsel being a musical director, that's different from an arranger. An arranger is the person who gets to be who takes the music, designs it in a way that makes it proficient for the band to play. The musical director takes that information and dictates, what each instrument or what person plays what part. So it's different jobs. So Edgar Sampson was the musical arranger for Chick Webb. Look what else Edgar Sampson was doing. An African-American saxophonist, orchestra leader, and composer, was among the earliest arrangers for the Machito Band when they emerged as a full-time working orchestra in 1941. Among the founding members of the Machito Orchestra were Freddie Skurrit of West Indian descent and Bobby Wooten, who was an African-American. Later on, African-American saxophonist Leslie Johnakins would join their ranks and his association with the Machito. Oh man, come on. One second. Let me go. Give me a second. Let me find my place. I don't know why I blanked out like that. Would remain all the way until the day Machito passed away in 1984. So here are African Americans not only playing in the band, but arranging music for Mario Bowser or the Machito band. So you talk about being involved in the very beginning, right? What is the thing that these Latinos talk about, these Puerto Ricans talk about in terms of hip hop? The rationale for them being co-creators is that we were there from the beginning, right? But so were we. We were there from the inception of the music, of Latin jazz. We were there in the very beginning. The word Latin jazz implies 50-50. You got Afro-Cuban, African-American. That's 50-50, my friend. You can't get away from that. Here you got African Americans not only playing in the band, but arranging the music in the band. But you didn't know that, Dr. Cologne, because you don't research. Listen, on behalf of all the people who spent endless hours going to school, getting their degrees, their master's and their doctorate degrees, on behalf of Dr. Cologne, I want to apologize to you guys. He is not representing you guys well. Because if you could go through all that education and make a rebuttal video that is filled with non-truths and clearly no researchable data, it's an embarrassment, Dr. Cologne. You should be ashamed of yourself. All right, let me see where I want to go. Oh yeah, let me give me 1 second, guys. Let me try to find Mr. Salsa Goals here. Give me 1 second while I find Mr. Salsa Goals. Because we're going to talk about Mr. Salsa Goals. Give me 1 second. Get my slides right. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. All right. We went through that. Okay. Here's something interesting. Dr. Cologne didn't like what Salsa Gold said in terms of our FBA people and our involvement in the creation of Latin jazz. He didn't like that. So let me tell you what Dr. Cologne did. He contacted Salsa Goals. And apparently he said, man, you got to help me out on this one. This Negro out here saying they created salsa. You got to come to my defense. All right. So Salsa Goals backtracked what he said to me to accommodate Dr. Cologne. It doesn't mean anything. So I took this off of Dr. Cologne's, this particular transaction, but this particular comment off of his video debunking me, apparently, or trying to debunk me. So this is Mr. Salsa Goals responding to Dr. Cologne. Thank you for the link. The link he's referring to is my video. I did take a look at most of the video earlier. I think your response is a little more in harmony with my understanding. The Puerto Rican contribution of salsa music is very evident. From what I understand, the African-American influence on salsa music is definitely there and deserves to be more acknowledged more. But as far as being any kind of foundation, I don't think is even remotely close to 50-50 along with the Afro-Cuban foundation. Now, again, I disagree with the brother. Why do I disagree? It's called Latin jazz. How could something that's called jazz not be part of the foundation? But I don't know his ethnicity, or I don't know his nationality. I'm assuming that maybe he's Hispanic. And so, Hispanics going to rock with each other like that. So I kind of expect a reaction or a comment like that. But he did acknowledge, of course, he called it an influence. If we're an influence, what is the Puerto Rican influence? What are they? They're not a foundation. And it's certainly not all Cuban. All right? Their music would not be where it is today had it not been for the African American. That's unquestionable. Let me play what Salsa Gold said, or what he said about Salsa Golds.
Now we get to another part of the video where he thinks this is really going to be an aha moment. I got you. And this is a section that I've called What is Salsa? Now, my number one fan is going to ask a question from a certain YouTuber by the name of Salsa Goals. I'm going to put the link in the description, and I encourage you to go check out that channel, Salsa Goals. Okay? Now, here is the question. Watch the clip.
Okay, as you can see, true savior. My question, although many communities contribute to the development of salsa, would you agree that the collaboration between Afro-Cubans and African-American jazz musicians laid the foundation from which salsa was born? The question is clear, okay? So here's his answer. Great comment, and thanks for asking or mentioning that. I agree 100% that African-American jazz played a major role in the development of salsa as shown in my videos. To the best of my understanding, the main foundation was Afro-Cuban music, especially the son Montuno. However, contemporary jazz was added to the template, thereby making the arrangements and harmonies and melodies more intricate and complex than they've been traditionally. The influence of jazz is one of the main things that, for me, distinguishes modern salsa from traditional Afro-Cuban music.
So the YouTuber responds with the definite, yes, there is a connection. Okay. But let's watch some clips from Salsa Goals when it comes to this issue as a whole. Now watch. He uses Salsa Goals as a foundation for his argument. But remember, in other videos, he continually tried to say how wrong I was when I did the Descarga video about the fact that when the Africans came to North America, it was a different experience altogether. So,
listen, Dr. Clone, what does this have to do with the Descarga? I don't even know where that came from. Again, he's trying to say that we had no access to drums. I don't know what he's talking about. Let's go.
Let's see this. Let's watch some clips from the same video YouTuber, Salsa Goals. And in fact, the video is all about that he made is did African Americans contribute to salsa? But let's look at the clip about something very interesting. Check this out.
A very strong African influence dominates these Afro-Cuban rhythms, perhaps because the Africans who were taken to Cuba and other parts of Latin America were allowed to maintain a direct connection with their musical traditions to some extent. However, the Africans who were taken to the United States were not allowed to retain their music in the same way, and as a result, they were basically cut off from their African musical tradition.
So first, my number one fan still maintains that the Africans were not stripped of their Africanism in North America. And yet this channel that he is using to support his claim that the Americans created salsa says otherwise. Now, let's check out some other clips.
Now, see, that's Dr. Clone. That's what you call debunking? You know that that's not true. You know that Congo Square existed. You know that Gullah Geechee people existed. I gave you other examples of the Clotilda, people keeping in touch with their African heritage well into the 20th century. I told you about the, well, you didn't know it at the time because you don't do any research because your mind is made up. Let's just focus on Congo Square and the Gullah Geechee people. You know the real history, but yet you still want to perpetuate this narrative that there was no drums in America, in North America. How can you call yourself a researcher or an intellectual person? No one with intellect would do that. You know the truth, but yet the truth doesn't matter. You rather perpetuate a narrative that suits your agenda. You're not an honest broker. That's why I don't want to debate you. Because no matter how many facts people present to you, you will not acknowledge it. Batch said the Puerto Ricans had nothing to do with hip hop. And you make a video, oh, something's wrong with them. You will never accept the truth. So you're going to form your own opinions. Let's move on. So again, using a clip about someone's belief, he's ill-informed. Salsa Goes only knows what he knows. He only knows what he was taught. But if I educate you on something that you didn't know about, then maybe you would change your opinion. Dr. Clone, you know the truth, but you refuse to change your opinion. You lose all credibility. Let's move on to the next Salsa Goes clip. Let's play it.
Let's watch some clips from Salsa Goals when it comes to this issue as a whole. Now watch. He uses Salsa Goals as a foundation for his argument. But remember, in other videos, he continually tried to say how wrong I was when I did the Descarga video about...
Oh, yeah. Okay. We already went over it. Let me move it over a little bit.
In North America. And yet this channel that he is using to support his claim that the Africans Americans created salsa says otherwise. Now let's check out some other clips that say there is some connection but not creation when it comes to African Americans and salsa. Let's listen.
World, such as jazz, blues, soul, and many others. But why is that?
Before we continue that, let me explain this diagram that I have, because it's important for you guys to understand how this works, okay? Let's define what is Latin jazz. Let's define it, because I think this is where the confusion is, okay? Now, this is how I understand it, okay? Africa being a foundation, right? You have the Afro-Cubans. You take their rhythms, not necessarily their music or their songs. You take their rhythms. That is what's important. I'm going to demonstrate to you why that's important. Please understand, listen to what I'm saying. You take Afro-Cuban rhythms and you join it with African-American jazz. That is Latin jazz, right? Now, from that union of Afro-Cuban music or Afro-Cuban rhythm and jazz, they birth subgenres: the cha-cha-cha, the mambo, and salsa. Okay? That's where it all comes from. It comes from this union of Afro-Cuban and jazz. All right. So please understand that I'm going to make this point, over and over again. All right, so let's continue that particular audio.
Well, as discussed in the previous video, remember that the Cuban musical community was essential in laying down the foundation for salsa music. And when Cuba was suddenly taken out of the picture, then the New Rican and the Puerto Rican musical communities stepped up to play a major role in preserving and updating that musical foundation. But how did the African American musical community contribute to salsa music? Well, first we need to understand the nature of musical contributions. For example, just as there is a difference between someone who prepares a meal and the person who supplied the ingredients that were used to prepare that meal, there is a difference between the community that actively participated in developing a musical style and the community that created the musical elements which were used in the development of that musical style. So, although the African American musical community may not have directly participated in the development of salsa music, a musical genre that was created by the African American musical community was used to develop salsa music, namely jazz. Jazz from the era of swing music had already been incorporated into the Cuban mambo music that was popular at New York City's Palladium Ballroom in the 1940s and 1950s. But when
Okay, so he said that. He said African Americans were instrumental in creating the subgenre, creating Latin jazz. He said that they were there in the very beginning. And although they didn't participate in the salsa era, but they were there in the beginning. Again, Puerto Ricans didn't create the salsa. They just perfected the rhythms that were already there from the Cubans. There would not be any salsa without, again, that union of African Americans and Afro-Cubans. As you could see, as I pointed to you before, you had African Americans playing in the Machito Band, arranging for the Machito Band. We were there from the very beginning. So there's no escaping out of that. Let me finish this audio. I think it's almost over.
The musical scene was cut off from the United States. Then musicians, mainly from the Puerto Rican and Puerto Rican communities, along with others, took over and preserved those Afro-Cuban rhythms that were already so popular. And along the way, they also upgraded those rhythms by adding elements of contemporary jazz to the music, thereby making the melodies and harmonies more complex. In fact, for me, this incorporation of jazz is the main ingredient that distinguishes salsa music from the simpler, more traditional Afro-Cuban rhythms that make up the foundation of the music. While African American musicians didn't directly contribute to the development of salsa music, some of them did directly collaborate in the creation of its sister genre, Latin jazz, or specifically Afro-Cuban jazz.
Okay, so I definitely disagree with him to an extent. I'm of the belief that there is no salsa without African American and Afro-Cubans putting their ingenuity together to create Latin jazz. All right? There is no salsa. So he makes it appear as if they developed independently and African Americans came on the scene late. He's totally incorrect about that. I would love to challenge him on that. You know, we were there from the very beginning. Again, I'm going to keep saying this. There is no salsa. There is no mambo. There is no cha-cha-cha without the African American jazz influence. That's a fact. And I challenge anybody who would assert that. I would say that they're totally incorrect. Now, what did I say in the very beginning, okay, of this whole thing? Latin jazz is the blending of rhythm and jazz, okay? Now, if you guys want to, if you have time, go to this website. It's called jazzpianosite.com. And it gives a jazz lesson. It's a tutorial on Afro-Cuban music. I know it's kind of difficult to see on your screen because the lettering is very light. But let me read some things for you, okay? And this is how I understand the music as well. Okay. Latin jazz, as the name implies, is jazz that uses rhythms derived from Latin American music. There are main categories of Latin jazz, okay? Afro-Cuban jazz, based on Cuban music with genres like mambo, cha-cha-cha, and salsa, popularized in the late 1940s and early 1950s, sometimes referring as Cubop. Even that name Cubop represents a joining of two groups, two different genres, okay? So, again, like the name implies, again, it says taking jazz, the rhythms derived from Latin America, not the music, the rhythms that are derived from Latin America. So we have to understand that's what we're talking about when we're talking about salsa. And I'm going to prove to you a little bit later that Cuban music has nothing to do, Puerto Rican music has nothing to do. What makes salsa salsa is the rhythm. Plain and simple rhythm. And I'm going to give you a lot of examples that will make my point. All right. So let's move down a little bit. And now, as I go down this particular page, you're going to see it's a tutorial. It's going to talk about the clave, different rhythms, and it's going to go down. Let's see. Let me get to a part where I find very interesting. talk about the motono, all these rhythms and things. They give you examples as you play on the piano. Now, Dr. Cone don't understand any of this because he's not a musician. So if I were him, I would hook up with a musician to help him understand what's going on here. So now, here are the two differences. Let me show you how related salsa is to Afro-Cuban jazz, according to this teacher on the website. All right. I'm going to play a portion of an audio of it as well. So it says, note also, the distinction between salsa and Afro-Latin jazz isn't always clear, but very generally. So basically, they're saying that there's a lot of things in common. A lot of things in common here. Whereas salsa goes try to make it seem like it's a separate thing altogether. I disagree with Mr. Salsa Goals. As you see in this particular statement, he says the distinction between salsa and Afro-Cuban Latin jazz isn't always clear cut, but very generally, salsa is danceable, has less improvisation and more vocalists, and uses complex chords. When we talk about complex chords, we talk about those jazz arrangements. While Afro-Cuban Latin jazz or Latin jazz is less danceable, i.e. has less driving rhythm, has more improvisation and more instrumental, and uses complex chords. So it's more in the line of how traditional jazz is played. But they almost share the same formula. So we have to understand what we're talking about. So when I say salsa, let me see. Let me go back here. Let me get off of here. I don't want to. Okay. Now, what I want to do here, I want you to hear a little bit what this instructor says. And this particular video basically is going to go through everything I just showcased for you on the website. You know, all the tutorials, all the explanations of rhythm and what have you. So let me play that portion of that for you.
So Latin jazz, as the name implies, is jazz that uses rhythms derived from Latin American music. Now, there are two main categories of Latin jazz. There's Afro-Cuban jazz, which is based on Cuban music with genres like the mambo, the cha-cha, and the salsa. And there's Afro-Brazilian jazz, which is based on Brazilian music with genres like the bossa nova and the samba. Now, this lesson will discuss only the former, that is, Afro-Cuban jazz. And I'll leave the latter for another video. So some music genres have such a well-known and iconic groove or rhythmic pattern that they are instantly recognizable. For example, if I play this, you instantly know that you're about to hear a nice slow blues. Or if I play this, you instantly know that you're about to hear a boogie woogie. Now, Afro-Cuban jazz is similar. It has a rhythmic pattern that is instantly recognizable as Afro-Cuban, which I'll go over in a moment. So then, the most important aspect and the defining characteristic of all Afro-Cuban music is the rhythm. To play in an Afro-Cuban style means to adhere to a particular rhythm. Without this rhythm, Afro-Cuban jazz is just regular jazz. This rhythm is the thing that holds...
You heard that? Without the rhythm, Afro-Cuban jazz is just jazz. Let me say that again. Let me see if I can find where he says that. Let's see.
It's the whole song together, and in fact, the whole genre together. Aspect and the defining characteristic of all Afro-Cuban music is... So then, the most important aspect and the defining characteristic of all Afro-Cuban music is the rhythm. To play in an Afro-Cuban style means to adhere to a particular rhythm. Without this rhythm, Afro-Cuban jazz is just regular.
Okay, I ended that
So
too
some
quick.
music genres have such a
Let's go back
well-known
here.
and iconically recognizable as Afro-Cuban, which I'll go over in a moment. So then, the most important aspect and the defining characteristic of all Afro-Cuban music is the rhythm. To play in an Afro-Cuban style means to adhere to a particular rhythm. Without this rhythm, Afro-Cuban jazz is just regular jazz.
There we go. Afro-Cuban jazz is just regular jazz without the rhythm. It didn't say Afro-Cuban jazz is just jazz without the Afro-Cuban music. It didn't say the music. It just said the rhythm. That is the formula that makes up salsa. The rhythm plus the influence of some. I'm not saying it's just exclusively African American, but I'm saying there's going to be African American. In other words, you can apply any melody. Hear what I'm saying? You can apply any melody to the rhythm and you can create salsa music. Hear me. Hear what I'm saying. It's not necessarily about the melody. It's not necessarily about a Cuban song or a Puerto Rican song. That plays a very small part in what salsa is. It's all about the rhythm. Before I move on, let me just see what else he says here.
This rhythm is the thing that holds the whole song together, and
it holds the whole song together. Without the rhythm, the song just falls apart. So it doesn't matter what the melody is. If the rhythm is not tight, it all falls apart.
In fact, the whole genre together. Now, the rhythmic features that characterize traditional jazz are a swing rhythm and a backbeat, that is, accents on beats 2 and 4 of each bar. Afro-Cuban jazz, on the other hand, is rhythmically different.
Okay, so it's going to go through this tutorial. It's going to break down, like I said, guys, listen, if you want to understand what salsa is, Afro-Cuban jazz is, I would encourage you to go on this website, thejazzpianosite.com. You will get all this, valuable information on what this stuff is, okay? Now, like I said, if Mr. Salsa Goals disagrees with me and he wants to debate me on that issue, whether or not we came late into salsa, we can have that debate. But my opinion is he can't get around the fact that salsa would not exist if it wasn't for Latin jazz. He has to show me salsa existing without Latin jazz. He already acknowledged that foundational Black Americans played a very important part in developing Latin jazz. He acknowledged that. But he makes salsa a different thing altogether. And he said we came in on the tail end of it. That's where he has it wrong. And I would challenge him any day to prove to me that salsa would have existed without Latin jazz. And it has nothing, very little to do with Cuban music, Puerto Rican music, Colombian music, Panamanian music. All of that is irrelevant in terms of what salsa is. So here comes the fun part. Let me find it real quick. Just give me a second. Oh boy. Now here we go. This is the fun part right here. All right. Okay. Now, to prove my point, we're going to take popular songs and we're going to salsarize them to show you that it's the rhythm that defines what salsa is. The only thing that makes it more Latin if they sang these words in Spanish. But they're going to sing these words in English, but you're going to hear the salsa vibe, which proves that salsa is all about the rhythm. It doesn't matter what melody you put to it. You guys understand me? It doesn't matter. We're going to use songs, popular songs. You can almost say these are FBA songs because we created all the music. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to say these are all FBA songs because we created all of it. And they're going to add a Latin or a salsa rhythm to it, or a modernized Afro-Cuban rhythm to it. So let's play an example. I'm going to play about 3 or 4 examples, maybe 4 examples. Let's try it. Let's try this one. Now, this is Hey Jude by the Beatles. We all know the Beatles were influenced by African Americans. So let's listen to this.
Remember to let them into your heart, then you can start.
It's getting there. Just give it a second.
Hey, don't be afraid. You were made to go out and get them. The minute you let them under your skin, then you begin to make it better. Anytime.
Here we go. Hear them jazz horns? Go ahead, FBA. Go ahead, FBA. All right, that's enough. Let's go to another one. Let's find another one. Man, come on. Come on. Let's find another one. Let's see. Let's do Frank Sinatra. My Way. Let's do Frank. Let's do old Blue Eye. Let's do him.
I traveled each and every highway.
This is the warm up. This is the warm up right here.
Much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets.
Oh, shucks.
But then again, to mention.
Go get that up. Yeah. Sing it. All right. Come on. It's nothing to do with the melody, folks. Salsa is the rhythm. It's all about the rhythm. I wish I could play more of these videos, but you know how, copyright issues. Michael Jackson, You Rock My World. Let's listen to the salsa-rized version of Michael Jackson, You Rock My World. All right. Go ahead, MJ. All right, let's move. Let's try another one. Let's find another one. All right. Now, this one, oh man, this got jazz all over it. Let's play Ain't Nobody, salsa-rized version. All FBA songs. Here we go. Listen to them chords. I'm going to steal some of them chords. Look at jazz all over that. All right, let's do. Hey, I'm having fun. I'm having fun. Let's go for another one. Let me see. Which one is this one? This one. Nah, Coolio. I'm interested in that one. Okay, Whitney Houston. Let's do Whitney Houston. I Will Always Love You. Let's try a little bit of that one.
If I should stay, I will know.
Oh, shucks. Yeah. All right. Okay, now this one is next one. One more. This is a really good one because he's going to sing this portion in Spanish, a little bit Spanish. And if you didn't know the song, oh my God, you might think that this was straight up from Latin America because they sing parts of it in Spanish. Now we all know Draft Punk, Get Lucky. You know, check this out. Oh, shucks. Sing that song. As BSIA would say, he's cosplaying. Look at him. All right. Listen, man, this is amazing. This is amazing. The point of me playing these videos is to demonstrate that salsa music is all about the rhythm. Has very little to do with the melody. You could put any music to the rhythm. That was the same case for Latin jazz. That's the same case for salsa music. The same principle. You could put anything to it. You know? So it's not, again, Dr. Cologne, it's not about the music. It's not about folk music from Puerto Rico, folk music from Cuba. That's not the thing that makes salsa salsa. It's the rhythm. It's the rhythm. It's the rhythm. I could say it 100 times and I know Dr. Clone won't get it. But again, I'm going to say, it's the rhythm. Don't get in your feelings about Puerto Rican culture and pride and all that. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's the rhythm, not the music, not the melody. All right. So I'm sorry for making this video so long. It was so much I had to cover. Again, guys, if you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments. I'd be glad to furnish you any links to anything that I said. Anything that I say in my videos, I can back up. I at least have 2 to 3 sources that I can pull from to back up whatever I say. Unlike Dr. Clone, I will never freestyle. I don't believe in that. You know, because I want to be able to back up everything I say. And I doubt Dr. Clone has any ammunition for me on this one. Because I prove that salsa music has nothing to do, I won't say nothing to do, but it's not important to tie it to Latin music, as it were. You can still have salsa music without it. That's the point. So it's about rhythm. So don't get in your feelings, Dr. Cologne. Don't get in your feelings. Again, I proved my point, and that's it. That's it. So again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please share. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. I know it was a long one, but it was just so much I had to cover. So until the next time, peace.